Om Jnana-timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Hyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratashe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we will continue on today. I'm sorry, my voice is a little low energy. I just had a bit of insomnia, so don't worry, I'm not unwell. But yeah, so today we're going to continue on with our discussion of chapter 10 of the Bhagavad-gītā as we began it last week. And so I wish to begin from, I'd say, the beginning, actually, because we only really got 2 shlokas in, and I wish to discuss a few further points. So without further ado, let me, next slide. So first, before we go into the chapter, I wanted to do an overview of the 10th chapter. The 10th chapter is structured very, very cleanly. It's structured very, very straightforwardly. As we discussed last week, Krishna says, and I'll get it up. What does he say? He says, Bhuya eva mahabaho, right? He says, again, O mighty armed Arjuna, because you are my dear friend, for your benefit, I shall speak to you further, giving knowledge that is better than what I have already, right? So Krishna, he's saying, I'm going to re-emphasize, I'm going to reiterate, I'm going to continue to speak on this topic, which I've already begun to discuss. And what is that topic? What is a topic we spent all of the 9th chapter studying? Who can tell me? Who can say? What was the 9th chapter about?
The most confidential knowledge.
The most confidential knowledge, right? Raja Vidyam, Raja Guhyam, right? So this most confidential knowledge is being again reiterated, right? So this is how the 10th chapter begins. Texts 1 to 11 are Krishna reiterating this most confidential knowledge, which, as we've already discussed, is Shuddha Bhakti, okay? And Krishna does this in 2 sections. Actually, if you read it, it's not immediately obvious, but based on how our acharyas have distinguished these 2, we can see a distinction in the flow of these texts. Text 1 to 7, Krishna, he's demonstrating, I am unknowable. No one can know me, right? The unknowability of God, the apophatic nature of God, right? This is what is stressed here. Krishna, no one can know me. No one knows Krishna. But then immediately afterwards, Krishna gives his very famous Chatur Shloki. Does anyone know what the Chatur Shloki is? We're discussing it today. What is the concept of a Chatur Shloki? We have lots of cameras off today, so I'm going to be picking on people. Mrunal Mataji, what is a Chatur Shloki?
It's the 4 verses that Krishna sang, and they summarize the whole Bhagavad-gītā.
Yes, perfect, right? So the Chatur Shloki is actually a concept which begins in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is where we find the origin of this concept. Because in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 2nd canto, we hear the first two cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam really describe the history of Srimad Bhagavatam. They describe to us how the Srimad Bhagavatam has come about to be spoken. They are part of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Some people say they're not part of the text, they're simply introducing it. And the third canto is where the Srimad Bhagavatam begins. But this is a bogus conclusion. Actually, the first two cantos are part of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but they're the part of the Srimad Bhagavatam that describe how the Srimad Bhagavatam has arisen. So these first two cantos describe, that's why we hear when it begins, right? We hear about Parikshit Maharaj being cursed, right? We hear all of these things. And then in second canto, we hear not just how the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken a few, in very recent history, right? Like a few thousand years ago or so, but instead we hear about how the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken at the very beginning of our creation, right? And we know, I won't recite the whole pastime because it's a rather common one and it's a little beside the point, but we know that when Brahma was created, right? Brahma, the creator, the maker of our universe, when he was created, he was there in an ocean of darkness and he saw nothing, right? And then he began to meditate and he heard the words tapa, right? Or rather the syllables tapa, austerity, dava, right there. And he began to meditate and perform austerities. And as a result of those meditations and as a result of those austerities, what happened? Well, he had a darshan of Krishna, and Krishna spoke unto him 4 central shlokas. And those 4 central shlokas are Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So Srimad Bhagavatam was first given in the form of 4 shlokas. For those of you, I'm not sure how many of you have had this. How many of you have read Srimad Bhagavatam? I'm not sure. But if any of you, I don't know how, okay, Vidhi Mataji has, right? How many of you have started to read Srimad Bhagavatam but haven't managed to finish it? Yeah. Well, if you're in that position, you can just read these 4, and then you can tell people you've read Srimad Bhagavatam. That's my little trick to get around that, right? Just read the Srimad Bhagavatam Chatur Shloki in Canto 2, and if somebody asks you if you've read Srimad Bhagavatam, you can say, yes, I've read Srimad Bhagavatam. Because those 4 shlokas contain the entirety of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, I'm not recommending to do that. Please read all of the thousands of shlokas we have in our current version, because it's much more nectarian. Although, again, that is a topic for another time. But there is a point to be made, and that is that these 4 contain the entire essence of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And if you analyze them, you'll be able to find it. Again, that analysis is for when all of you study Bhakti Vaibhav. However, this is where we find the tradition, right? The Shastra can be captured up into 4 shlokas. Srila Prabhupada here writes, sometimes people may wonder, how is this possible? How is it possible that I'm reading such a long Srimad Bhagavatam, and yet you're going to tell me that these 4 shlokas are also the entirety of the Srimad Bhagavatam? And Srila Prabhupada here writes that Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of Krishna. It is Krishna in literature form. And Krishna is both smaller than the most small and larger than the most large, and yet he never loses his quality. In the same way, Srimad Bhagavatam is like this. It can be 4 shlokas, it can be 10 million shlokas, but it is always Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so this is the precedence that is given for a Chatur Shloki. We then find, as Mrunal Mataji has very nicely enlightened us, that Bhagavad-gītā also has a Chatur Shloki, right? Bhagavad-gītā also has 4 shlokas, which summarize its entirety, and they are found at the very conclusion, at the very end of Krishna speaking, the king of all knowledge, the most confidential knowledge, right? Right before Arjuna begins to respond, Krishna speaks these 4 shlokas, okay? So, very essential for your memorization. Again, in the same way that I said, if you want to tell somebody you've read Srimad Bhagavatam and you can just read those 4 shlokas, in the same way as well, you can memorize these 4 shlokas and tell somebody you've memorized the Gita, okay? So these are very, very essential for our shloka memory, for our study, and for our sadhana. I don't make many demands, I don't like to think, but one demand I would love to make is for all of us to memorize these shlokas and really ruminate on them as we go on. They're very, very deep. And as we dwell on them throughout our day, they can give very deep realizations. Okay, so then we go on to that discussion of the Chatur Shloki. Then afterwards, at this point, as I discussed last week, Arjuna, he accepts the position of Krishna. He accepts the conclusions of Krishna. He accepts the message of the Bhagavad-gītā. Everything from here on in, we're getting free, right? This is some extra stuff, right? In terms of the original purpose of the Gita to compel Arjuna, that has been achieved. Arjuna has accepted the transcendental position of Krishna, and he's accepted whatever you say, Krishna, I'll do it. Srila Prabhupada writes, all of the other questions that are now being said are being said for our benefit. They're being said for the benefit of all the other people, that this knowledge can be further elaborated upon. So we're really reaching the climax of the Bhagavad-gītā in a sense. Then it'll turn down a bit, but then it'll rise up to climax again twice. So it's not that it'll get boring from here on in. And then Arjuna, he asks, he says, you've spoken so much about your opulences, your vibhutis. Again, the name of this chapter given by our previous acharyas consistently is Vibhuti Yoga, right? The yoga of the opulences. So then Krishna, in response to Arjuna saying, okay, you keep on saying, these are my opulences, these are this, these are that, but you speak very briefly about them. Speak about them longly, please. And in that section, then, we have text 19 to 42, the conclusion of the chapter, in which Krishna very thoroughly describes his opulences in his potencies. And this section is famous, right? Some of you might be familiar with the pattern. Of X, I am Y. Of X, I am Y, right? Of demons, I'm Prahlad Maharaj. Of wielders of weapons, I'm Lord Ram. Like this, okay? And that's how Krishna explains it. The significance of all of that, we will discuss as we reach that section. Okay, having had discussed all of that, that is a general overview of the 10th chapter. Let us get right back into 10.1. I know I normally don't like to repeat the shlokas, but when we go through them verse by verse, but today we will be doing so. Maybe we can have Tanya Mataji can say the English after I'm finished. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bhuya Eva Mahabaho Shrinu Me Paramam Vachaha Yatteham Priyamanaya Vakshami Hitakamyaya.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, listen again, O mighty armed Arjuna, because you are my dear friend, for your benefit I shall speak to you further, giving knowledge that is better than what I have already explained.
Jai. So here we are hearing, right? We are hearing the principle that I already said, which is that that Krishna, he is repeating what he has already spoken, right? He is repeating it again for multiple reasons. One is that he's very, very excited to speak this, right? Krishna, he is very enthused to speak, because whenever there's the glories of bhakti, naturally what comes later? The glories of the bhakta, right? The glories of the devotee. So Krishna, he is very eager to glorify this devotion. He is very eager to glorify this devotee. And again, because of this, Krishna, he very eagerly speaks. He doesn't let Arjuna even ask a question. As we mentioned last week, Arjuna has been silent since he asked his many questions that began the 8th chapter. So then, Krishna, he says this, but also there's another reason why Krishna says to repeat this. Does anyone want to guess? Does anyone have any idea? What would another reason be that Krishna, he is repeating this again? Why is he Bhuya Eva? Why is he once again speaking? I'm gonna, again, whenever there's cameras aren't on, I'm gonna be picking on people. Vidhi Mataji, why would you think Maybe it's all right if you're wrong. I just want us to be thinking about it. Why, if you had to take a stab in the dark?
He's just reinforcing for us, the future generations, because he knows that it's going to be repeated.
Yes, definitely. There's definitely an aspect of that. Because he forgets. Krishna forgets or Arjuna forgets? Arjuna. Yes, you could say that. However, Arjuna is about to accept it all, right? But that is a good point. Arjuna, in one sense, might forget, and as Vidhi Mataji has pointed out, you're all on a decent enough track. And as Vidhi Mataji points out, this is relevant to future generations who read it. And the reason why, well, does anyone else have any other ideas? I'll wait for one more idea, and then I'll at least give something of what I've understood of this text. What other reason could we think? Who will I call out on? Varun Prabhu. I don't. Do you have any mental speculation as to why Krishna is repeating himself again?
Is it like something that is really important is said twice?
Yes, that's a nice one, right? So all good answers and all true, right? So what is most required, what is most emphasized is often repeated multiple times, right? We can remember back to the famous Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam, right? It's considered bad Sanskrit poetry to say bhakti twice, and yet it is said twice, because who cares if the poetry is bad? We need to underline this point that bhakti is independent and supreme, right? So all good points, and we are trying to emphasize this most confidential knowledge, okay? So how do we understand it? There are two general other ways that I would understand why there's a repetition here. One is that Krishna, he is speaking this knowledge again, but he is speaking also now not just a repetition of chapter 9, but also a repetition of chapters 7 and 8. Srila Prabhupada, he mentions this in the purport. He brings up chapter 7 and 8, and he discusses about how we've already discussed the vibhutis, right? We've already discussed the glories and opulences of the Lord, right? What was the 7th chapter, if not discussing the opulences of the Lord, how all energies come from him, right? All reality flows from him. We've already discussed the vibhutis of the Lord. We've already discussed his energies. We've already discussed all of these things, right? And yet now we are going to discuss them in light of the most confidential knowledge. And therefore, Krishna, he is repeating himself. He is synthesizing all that has been spoken before. Krishna, he is repeating again what he has discussed in chapter 9, but also in terms of what he's discussed in chapter 7 and 8. And he is repeating again what he has discussed in chapter 7 and 8 in terms of what he has discussed in chapter 9. Furthermore, Krishna, he's a little bit of a rascal. And Krishna likes to speak in what we would call paroksha vad. We will discuss more about what paroksha vad is in a later slide, because it has to do with the second text. But paroksha, does anyone know what paroksha means? It's a Sanskrit word that we don't often encounter in our studies, but it does come up in Srila Prabhupada's books. And Srila Prabhupada does every once in a blue moon discuss it. Does anyone know what does paroksha mean? Paroksha means to see, yes?
Sorry, bro. In context to?
In context to knowledge or to teaching.
Yeah, okay.
So paroksha means to see through the eyes of another, right? But Krishna sometimes, it can also mean indirect knowledge, right? Because technically it means to see through the eyes of another, but practically it ends up meaning indirect, right? Because we're indirectly going about it, right? So Krishna, he often likes to speak indirectly, and we find this mentioned in Srimad-Bhagavatam. Srimad-Bhagavatam describes, and actually Krishna himself, he says, I like to speak indirectly about all sorts of things. And we might have been experiencing this, right? How many times in this in this whole discussion of Bhagavad-gītā, have I said directly Krishna is saying this, but indirectly he is glorifying bhakti, but indirectly he is drawing out the glories of the devotees, right? This is the nature of Krishna. Krishna is very indirect. Krishna is, again, a little bit of a rascal. Even Dwarkeshwar Krishna, the noble lord of Dwarka, even he can be a bit of a rascal, especially then Vrajanath Krishna, right? The lord of Vrindavan. So Krishna, he likes to speak indirectly. And because of this, Krishna, he is emphasizing this. He's speaking it again, so that even though he is speaking indirectly, even though he is sometimes speaking in riddles, he is speaking it again so that it will be clear, so that it will be clearly understood. Because not just Arjuna will forget, but again, as a synthesis of Varun and Vidhi Mataji's points, but later generations who hear this text will be confused. What are the indirect purports that Krishna is drawing out? Okay, so Bhuya. He's repeating this knowledge. Okay, then let's go to text number 2. Okay, maybe we can have Shivam Prabhu can read out the English for us. Name vidu sura ganaha prabhavam na maharshayaha aham madir hi devanam maharshinam cha sarvashaha.
Neither the host of demigods, nor the great sages know my origin or opulences. For in every respect, I am the source of the demigods and sages.
So, and also just as a quick side note, because we've gone back to my slideshows. You all should have your Gitas open in front of you. I won't be sharing each shloka, so if your Gita isn't in front of you, I'll give you 2 seconds to run and grab it. And while I let everyone run and grab it. And also, if you can, feel free to run and grab a webcam and turn your video on. Yeah, I'm going to make it a policy now to have my questions pick on everyone who doesn't have their videos on. Okay, so hopefully that's enough time for you all to have grabbed your Bhagavad-gītas as they are. If you don't have an as it is, then please get that one instead. Okay, so what have we heard that Krishna now, he's continuing to speak about this knowledge, and he's stressing again his unknowability. No, Alex, yours is also an as it is. It's just a different, it's just a, how do we put it? A different manuscript of the long archival tradition. Oh, Tarun Prabhu, are you back and Shavina Mataji, are you back from America? Jai, will you be at a little side note for all of those of you in Sydney? We're celebrating the Vyas Puja of my revered spiritual master today, so it'd be really nice for any of you who can to attend. Will you be going today?
What time is it, Prabhu?
It's 5 p.m. at the temple. Venuvadak Prabhu will be going.
Yes, we got the message from Venuvadak Prabhu. We will trying to go there.
Yes, Jai. Well, you can only do what you can do, but yeah, just for anyone else in Sydney, we're celebrating Vyas Puja today. I will not be able to attend in person, but it would still be nice for those of you to attend in person if you can. Okay, so we find the second text now, right? What is Krishna saying? Krishna is, again, as I mentioned in the outline of this chapter, he is underscoring a very basic reality, and that is that Krishna is radically unknowable. We cannot know anything about Krishna, right? Nothing can be known about him, right? Because who doesn't know about him? Neither the demigods nor the great sages, right? The demigods we can think are some of the highest beings in existence. Indra, right? Vayu, right? Brahma, Ganesh, right? All of these individuals, very, very powerful, very, very knowledgeable, right? And yet, what does Krishna say here? They know nothing about me, right? And if they do know something, they definitely don't know my origins. Our acharyas, they say, in the same way that a child does not know where their father was born, right? At least they can't deduce that knowledge. They have no way of knowing it except by the father telling them. In the same way, how can the demigods know, right? Krishna is the source of them. There's a Christian prophet named Joseph Smith, and he gives an analogy of a tree, right? And he says that if a tree is rotten, then none of its branches will be healthy, right? And we can say the same thing. Krishna, he's making the point of even the demigods, right, who run the universe, the demigods who created the universe, right? If even they don't know, then how can anyone else in this universe know, right? If the source, if the trunk of the tree is rotten, then how can any of the branches be healthy? In the same way, how can anyone in this world know if even the demigods do not know? And then some may raise the question, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur does. Maybe we can say the demigods don't know because we know, how do you become a demigod? Who wants to tell me? How can you become a demigod? If I want to become a demigod, if I want to have my life's aspiration to become Indra, what should I do?
Do sakam karma?
Yes, right? Do karma yoga, right? Engage in karmic activities. And so one might say, oh, okay. The demigods, they're simply bewildered. They love their senses. They love to interact with their senses. They're very much trapped up in their karmic activities. 1 second, it's saying the Zoom will end in 10 minutes. That doesn't make sense. Yes, it's saying all of these things, right? 1 second, I'm just gonna stop the screen share because it's telling me the Zoom will end. But I'm in the temple Zoom, which is a premium one. Okay.
Zoom 40
Sorry?
minutes is up. It says on the top Zoom meeting 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Maybe the temple is not paid. Maybe the temple is not paid. Yeah, they've used all the funds for the temple rebuild. If that's the case, what we'll do is at the 10 minutes point, we will have our 5-minute break early, and I will send a different Zoom link into the WhatsApp group. I'll send my personal university one, which is unlimited. Because yeah, the university is not renovating a temple. No, I'll talk to Ganesham Prabhu after this, and see what the samasya is. Okay. Dark days. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep on going then. Sorry to get disturbed with that. I did not realize we are no longer on a premium account. Well, that's my friendly reminder. Please donate to the temple renovation drive. Okay, so let's keep on going. Let me share my screen again. So, Krishna, you could make the point. Okay, you can see my screen? Yeah. You might make the point. Oh, well, they're all intoxicated with their senses. But then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, what does he mention? Chakravarti Thakur, he says, well, then Krishna mentions all of the sages, all of the rishis, right? And they definitely are in control of their senses. They are not intoxicated by their senses and therefore cannot have knowledge of Krishna. They are not intoxicated at all. So therefore, there's something much deeper going on here. There's something much more primal going on in our understanding of this. Okay. So before we go ahead, I wish to discuss the different levels of knowledge, because these different levels of knowledge, again, / realization, these are, I think, very important in order to understand the unknowability of Krishna and in turn his knowability. Of course, right now we are discussing how Krishna is unknowable, but spoiler alert, he is also knowable in a sense. And the way that we can understand these dimensions can be really well understood, again, through the system of these 5 levels of realization. These are from Prabhupada's books, but Prabhupada, and mainly from Prabhupada's lectures. But again, Prabhupada doesn't mention these ones so much. He's often discussing other systems of knowledge, but these ones come up once in a blue moon. If you go through Vedabase, you could probably read all of the references in like half an hour. So again, it's not like Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead or something, which is a very recurring theme. Nevertheless, I think it's very substantial and important to discuss. Okay, so at the very beginning of these levels of knowledge, we have pratyaksha. Does anyone know what pratyaksha means? You should know. We've already discussed it.
Visible?
Yes, pratyaksha is visible, you could say, or we can also say direct perception, as Srikanta Sena Prabhu has said, right? This is when you are seeing things, and this is material understanding. This is empiricism, to use the pretentious philosophical terminology, right? This is what I see is what is, right? All that I see in front of me is what is, right? I go to the temple, the deity is made of marble. I see marble in front of me. There's a marble statue in front of me, right? This is pratyaksha. This is the lowest form of knowledge. Higher still, then, is paroksha. We've already discussed paroksha, right? Paroksha is indirect knowledge. Or how did I say, what is the very literal meaning of paroksha?
Seeing through someone's eye?
Yes, seeing through the eyes of another, right? This is paroksha, right? So paroksha is when someone says, okay, my perception of this world is not complete, right? I am seeing such a small fraction. I can't even see the entire wavelength of light, right? I'm only seeing one tiny fraction of the light wavelength, right? Ultraviolet, infrared. I can't perceive these things, right? What to speak then of all the other aspects of reality beyond simply just light, right? I can't see everything. Therefore, I require the insight of somebody who does have a much deeper and further sight. Parokshavad is seeing through the eyes of the other. Okay, and so parokshavad is when one starts to take to the shastras. One says, I cannot fully perceive reality, so I will take the realization and understandings of the shastra. When the shastra speaks about the material world and it says it is XYZ, I can accept this, right? So this is understanding about the fullness of the material world. Okay, then we have aparoksha. Aparoksha is one level higher. Does anyone want to wager a guess? If paroksha is seeing through the eyes of another, what is aparoksha? We know in Sanskrit means it's the opposite. It's the negative version of what is being discussed. In English, we say un or non.
Not seeing through the eyes of another.
Yes, exactly. Tanya Mataji is our esteemed Sanskrit scholar. Tanya Mataji has told us that it is aparoksha, right? It is not seeing through the eyes of the other. What would that mean? That means one has realized the knowledge of paroksha. One doesn't need to see through the eyes of the other. They directly are realizing the nature of this world, okay? This level, aparoksha knowledge, is open to even impersonalists, right? Even impersonalists can reach this because this is knowledge about this world, right? These first three really determine how we see this world, but none of this tells us anything about Krishna. Okay, we start learning then about the transcendental domain at the level of adhokshaja. Okay, does anyone know, what does adhokshaja mean? It's one of the names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Cannot be understood by material senses.
Yes, beyond the material senses, adhokshaja, right? And so adhokshaja knowledge is knowledge beyond the material senses. Again, this is where the unknowability of Krishna begins, right? Bhakti-siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he says adhokshaja mainly refers to the Vaikuntha planets. So this isn't even Krishna running around with his mother, right? Adhokshaja knowledge is just general understandings of the qualities of the spiritual world. We cannot infer the qualities of the spiritual world from the material world, and therefore it is distinct from understanding the nature of the material world. We can infer basic things, that it's maybe eternal or something, but you would not be able to speak of the positive qualities of Vaikuntha. You could say what Vaikuntha is not, but you wouldn't be able to tell me what Vaikuntha is. until you are having the level of understanding of the Adhokshaja platform. Okay. And then, because I'm racing against this clock ending the meeting in 1.5 minutes, we have aprakrita. Actually, I think there should be a long A in there. Aprakrita. Yes, as Srikanta Sena Prabhu has said, not within this material world, but above it. Then we have aprakrit. Aprakrit knowledge is in many ways the direct opposite of pratyaksha. Aprakrit knowledge is direct perception of the highest domain, and aprakrit knowledge is on the Raganuga platform. So is Adhokshaja, actually. Raganuga Bhakti we began to discuss last week. But basically, it's a direct perception, and on aprakrit we start perceiving Goloka Vrindavan. Okay, the meeting's about to end, so in the WhatsApp group I'll send my personal Zoom link, and then we can all continue the session with that. Okay, Hare Krishna, see you all in a few minutes. We won't do 5 minutes, please just join instantly, because I was midway through a point. Okay.